Okay, we're good.
Sorry, actually not live. Are we going? We should start over. Alright, class, how are we doing this summer?
Good, how are you?
Good. I'm doing fine. Today, we are going to delve in a little further on our lesson about oil history. We're going to start out with a couple video clips about a couple elements of oil history.
I think I've seen this. I have seen this before.
Okay, so while I am waiting on another video to load, I will hand out a matrix for you. While it's fresh in your mind, I want you to jot down what you think Edwin Drake's main contribution to the oil industry was. Maybe if he had more than one, what they were. And I will play you a video on another individual that we're going to look at today. I'll give you a minute to write first.
Is this in the video?
No, just a little bit on Drake was in the video.
Oh, okay.
We're going to discuss Drake and the person who the next video is about, plus everyone else on the sheet after the video. Alright, we'll go ahead and get started on the next video. The first one was kind of how the whole oil industry got started, and this one is what it became in a very short time.
Already a wealthy man by his late 20s, Rockefeller saw
thousands of petroleum refineries quickly sprang up along the city's rail lines. Rockefeller had an opportunity when he saw one. In 1864, he bought his first oil refinery. As the Civil War ended and American economy became more and more industrialized, demand for kerosene grew in the nation's rapidly expanding urban areas. Rockefeller's economy soared. Despite his success, Rockefeller was not content. His drive to expand his operations led the diversity of his suppliers, over which he had virtually no control. The Rockefeller stabilized and controlled, and the best way to get control was to buy it. He bought his own ships to transport Rockefeller kerosene from Cleveland to the Midwest, tanker cars to transport crude oil to the company's refineries and warehouses in New York. By 1879, after 15 long years of intimidation, force, and strong-arm tactics, the Standard Oil Company controlled an incredible 90% of all refinery operations in the United States. But Rockefeller's overwhelming power caused some Americans to fear that the free enterprise system was in danger. Criticism of Rockefeller was
Creepy picture.
only Britain to protect himself. Rockefeller came up with a brilliant plan. In 1882, he organized the Standard Oil Trust. It was the mechanism by which monopoly was created. What Rockefeller did with all of his oil companies, he, in a sense, folded them into the Standard Trust that ended up owning all of the shares of these companies. As the 20th century began, the automobile was transforming the oil industry. Gasoline-powered vehicles promised more than made up by the use of petroleum and kerosene production. Between 1900 and 1910, almost a half a million cars took to America's roads. It was clear that new sources of petroleum would have to be found. And began looking for the black gold in most unlikely areas. One of these areas was Texas. The first gusher of Texas crude exploded from the ground on January 10, 1901. It also marked the beginning of the end for Standard Oil's domination of the oil industry. By 1910, Texas-based oil companies were starting to compete for markets throughout the country. The once invincible Standard Oil began to show cracks. In 1911, those cracks burst. On January 6th, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the Standard Oil Trust was in violation of federal laws which prohibited the restraint of trade. Chief Justice Edward White ruled that Standard Oil would have to be broken up.
Okay, so you saw in the first video Colonel Drake and how he started the oil industry, and then you saw from the second video John D. Rockefeller and how he kind of took the oil industry and made it into big business and lots of money.
Was this all in Pennsylvania?
It is actually on early oil entrepreneurs, kind of the start of the oil industry, and people that played important parts and made key contributions.
Actually, Mr. Lee, I think she was talking about
The
Johnny
video.
Rockefeller in PA.
Oh, okay. He actually was, he lived in Cleveland. He did have dealings in Pennsylvania. He had an office at the National Transit Building in Oil City, and he did come into the region from time to time to check on all of his holdings. And he actually ran a few other side businesses in the area.
So that's what they were talking about in Titanic when, Jack and Rose are in the third level, but then they show the smoking room, and they brought up, the one guy said that he can't touch me, and then the other guy said, that's what Rockefeller said, but the Supreme Court won't have it. Now I know what they're talking about. It was Standard Oil.
Good job.
I'm so happy I made that connection. on
Yep,
YouTube.
Rockefeller's Standard Oil.
Dude, that how the states got their shape. I love that show. That's what the first video was. I love that show.
Oh.
The what? Wait.
How the states got their shapes. That's what the first clip was
I
from.
was like wondering that. Well, until-
The Pennsylvania, the one on dialect was banging.
There you go.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to do early oil entrepreneurs. We already learned about Drake and Rockefeller a little bit from our video. So first is Edwin L. Drake. In 1857, he was sent to Titusville, PA to investigate the rock oil seep that was occurring there. Some people say that he actually discovered oil. He did not discover oil. He was the first person to drill a successful oil well and make it into a commercial success, able to sell it, and because of some other things that were happening at the time that we will learn about in a minute, he was able to sell it and make some money. But he also invented the drive pipe, which was one of his main contributions to the industry. As they said in the video, it was the forerunner to casing. They case all wells even now, water wells, oil wells, natural gas wells. This prevents collapse, and he actually didn't patent it. If he would have, he would have been very rich, but he didn't. He died penniless. Like I said, they still use that drive pipe today, except it's more complex and there are more layers than just a single one.
He would be from Pennsylvania and die penniless. Depressing.
Poor guy.
Let me see here.
I hope y'all know you're gonna hear my voice in like all your presentations. I hope you know you're gonna hear my
Okay,
voice.
so in 1859, he also struck oil. He, on August 27th, at 69.5 feet in a straight stand on the site of what is now Drake Well Museum and Park. And his well launched the modern petroleum industry, like I mentioned. Alright, so before we go on to Samuel Keir, let's fill in your matrix for Drake. So, what were his contributions that I mentioned?
The first successful drill thing. I don't remember what it was called.
The first one to drill a successful oil well 69.5 feet down.
No, 69.
Right.
3 feet.
Whatever.
Whatever.
Well, 3 is technically more.
I know, if you want to get technical about decimals, man,
You know what? Shh.
Sorry.
you could just kick it up the drive pipe.
Wow.
Can anybody else remember anything that Drake did in his process of drilling the first successful oil well that was important to the industry?
He invented the drive pipe.
Yep, he invented the drive pipe. Okay, so next is Samuel Keir. 10 years before Drake, he actually developed a process to refine oil. Like I said, Drake did not discover oil. They had been using oil since the time of the ancient Greeks. I don't know if any of you have seen movies or anything, but they used Greek fire as one of their weapons. That was oil. They also used it to grease their chariot wheels. The Native Americans would use it for years to help them tan hides, to heal wounds, to kind of heal sores on their horses and other things like that.
That can't be healthy. That can't
And
be healthy.
so Keir collected the oil from his father's salt mines because they would drill for salt, and they would get oil with the salt, and that would ruin a salt well. Or they would also get it in a water well, and that would ruin a water well. But so it was a waste product in that sense. And his wife was diagnosed with, I believe, tuberculosis, and the doctor prescribed rock oil as a treatment, which was basically oil. So he kind of took that opportunity, and with a 1-barrel still, which means he could distill 1 barrel of oil at a time, he refined oil, and he sold it as a cure-all.
Wait, so, Mr. D, so did his wife die?
I don't know that. Matt?
That's the random question. definition of like refined oil? 'Cause I actually do not know that.
The refining process is a process where they heat oil, crude oil, and then as it cools, at different temperatures, different products come off. So I think it's a very high temperature. You have like your propane, butane, methane.
Oh,
As you
okay.
go down through, you get your different diesel fuel, gasoline.
Okay, I see.
And the very lowest you're left with is like your tar and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So that's where you get all kinds of things from that process. As I mentioned, Kier started with a 1-barrel still. He eventually moved to a 5-barrel still. They also were able to use this product for a light source, and he was one of Drake's first customers. After Drake drilled his well, Kier came and purchased oil from Drake. I believe it was for $40 a barrel delivered to Pittsburgh.
What?
And we have to remember that a dollar in the 1850s and 60s is worth about $40 now. So we're complaining about $100 a barrel oil. And this is the label from Kier's bottle over here. It's blown up, and there's some of his bottles there. You can see it's a natural remedy. He has diarrhea, cholera, piles, burns and scalds. Basically, anything you can think of, it was supposed to cure it. So, with that, what did Kier do to contribute to the oil industry?
Commercialized it?
Kind of. He developed the refining process so this crude oil that was coming out of the ground had a use beyond what the Native Americans had been using it for years. So he commercialized it through what though?
Refinement?
Yep, the refining process. Next is E.A.L. Roberts. He patented his well torpedo in 1864, and he patented the process of shooting wells. This process mainly used nitroglycerin, and the purpose of the process was to remove wax and increase production of a well. Pennsylvania oil is paraffin-based. Paraffin is a wax. Some of you may know, either you or your mothers may go to the spa and get a paraffin dip. That's if you're dipping your hands in wax, it's paraffin wax. They get it right out of an oil well. And that can cause, it can be good because they can use it for things like that. They use it in crayons. They coat your M&Ms and Skittles in it actually.
Oh, cool.
There's a thin layer on the outside, that's why they melt in your mouth, not in your hands. They put it in gum, they put it in chapstick and sunscreen. They coat cheeses and some fruits with it as a preservative. It's in a lot of things so they can use it, but it's wax. So it kind of clogs up the oil wells. And originally they would put down something that looked like a big wire brush on the end of their tool string to kind of scrape that wax off. But E.A.L. Roberts invented a technique where you would put a torpedo down, which is kind of a long metal tube with a point at the end. You would fill it with water first, and if you made it to the well with your quart, or your, a gallon or so jar or can of nitroglycerin, which was very explosive. There was a lot of people killed and injured in these types of accidents in the oil fields. Then you would pour that in. You didn't want to pour it into the empty torpedo because it could still spark and explode. When you poured it in, it would displace the water, and then you would lower it down the hole after you put a blasting cap on top. And then you would drop a weight on top of it that they called a go devil, because you would drop it and go like the devil. So he invented, not only did he patent the torpedo, he patented the process. And because of that, he more or less had, with the Roberts Torpedo Company that he and his brother W.B. founded in 1865, they were the only company allowed to legally shoot wells. And they kind of had the first oil monopoly. They were before Rockefeller. They actually hired the Pinkerton detectives to make sure that people called moonlighters weren't illegally shooting wells at cheaper prices at night. And as I mentioned, this would increase production. It would blow the wax away, and it would also kind of blow the rock up so then the oil could flow more freely out of the well. So, let's move on to...
This is a really long question. And what do the letters stand for? Like, what is EAL and WB? It's like, why do you use
WB
long names?
is Walter Brooks, I think, and
Oh, okay.
EAL... I'm not sure what his three initials are.
I just wasn't sure if they're just trying to say ink or if they actually like. Just
No, those are
initials.
their initials.
I'm just curious. Because when you said WB, I'm like, why can't you just use
How many
those
names you got?
So call me NH. I'm sorry.
All right, so what did E.A.L. Roberts invent and contribute to the oil industry?
Acronyms.
Not really.
Okay, no, okay, no, now seriously, he invented, the well torpedoes, or, the shooting wells, or are they two different things?
You use a torpedo to shoot a well. So,
Oh.
he invented the torpedo, and he
For the
also invented
process.
the process of using that torpedo to shoot the well.
So this is all for easier access then, right, to the oil?
Yep, this was,
Okay.
once you drilled the well, you could shoot it, and then it would make the oil come out more freely because it would get rid of wax and some of the rock formations at the bottom.
And what did they call, the weight, the Go Devil?
The Go Devil. The cans they transported in, they called angel cans. They were made out of copper, so they wouldn't spark, and they were called angel cans because if you dropped them, then you'd be with the angels.
Wow.
I'm so glad. The names are so entertaining.
Alright, our next person is Samuel Van Sickle. He built and operated the first successful oil pipeline in 1865. It ran 5 miles from Pibble to Miller Farm. You heard Pibble mentioned in our first video there, a boomtown. And in 1 hour, it did the work of 500 teams working 10 hours. A team would be a group of a couple guys that would haul the oil in barrels from the well to the same dump station that this pipeline could carry it to, and they would charge $3 a barrel, where Van Sickle would charge $1 a barrel to put it through the pipeline. So this angered the Teamsters in Pibble, and there was some riots and more Pinkertons involved. As I mentioned, it was a third of the price of what the Teamsters charged, and it put them out of business. So, like I said, it didn't make them happy.
This was in Pennsylvania, right?
Yep, this was in Pennsylvania. It was in Pithole, Pennsylvania, which is like, I think, 5 or 6 miles from Titusville. So, what should we put in our matrices for Van Sickle?
Started the first oil pipeline.
Yep.
Well, first successful one anyway, I'm sure that there were others.
Screw this up. I just put the wrong stuff for Van Sickle. No, I'm serious. I'm assuming we're going to.
He's really mad now.
Oh, I kind of skipped over
Sorry, I'm like
Rockefeller.
that student who's just driving crazy. I'm sorry. I'm really trying. I'm screwing this up.
It's okay.
But
And I should mention before pipelines that they used barrels for it. As I said that already. But this made it so, as I mentioned, Rockefeller, with all the pipelines that he had and rail lines, connected to the oil regions a little better. We'll get into him a little more later. Next are the Densmore brothers. They patented a rail car for transporting oil in 1866. It was the first car to ship oil in bulk as opposed to in barrels. So these Teamsters that I mentioned before might have hauled their oil to the rail station where they would load the barrels onto a train car and haul them that way. Whereas these ones could be lined up at an oil dump at either a pipeline or barrels still. And this is what it looked like right here. This is the one that used to sit at Drake Well. There would be those 2 big wooden storage tanks on there. And you could fill those full of oil and transport the oil in 2 of those instead of individual barrels. This was the forerunner to horizontal tank cars, which replaced these models not too long after they were actually invented. As the next bullet says, they were only popular for about a year because sitting vertically like that, they were a little unstable. We all know railroads aren't the most smooth riding things. So, what did the Densmore brothers invent then?
The first rail car.
Yep, they invented a rail car for transporting oil in bulk. And finally, we're going to get back to Mr. Rockefeller. The video mentioned he built his first refinery in Cleveland in 1863. By 1867, he owned the largest refining company in the world. He founded Standard Oil in 1870, and by the end of the decade, he held a monopoly on the petroleum industry. I think the video mentioned that he not only owned refineries, but he had some control over the railways. People found out the railways were giving him breaks and special rates. He owned several newspapers. Why do you think he might want to own newspapers? Or
To
at least put people in
advertise?
charge of them?
Free advertising.
Advertising is one. And remember what the video said about the perception of him?
So you can control the news.
Yep, he controlled the news. He put people in charge of the newspapers that would kind of portray him positively. Even though he was a monopolist, the world's first billionaire, he was actually a great philanthropist. He donated a lot of money to a lot of good causes. But most people still remember him as the person who controlled the whole oil industry and held a major monopoly for a long time until it was broken up, due in large part to Ida Tarbell and her work that exposed the kind of secrets of Standard Oil.
So did he die penniless too?
No, he died a very rich man. His relatives are still political figures in New York, and they've been senators, and yeah, they have what, Rockefeller Center in New York.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he
Named
made
for-
so much money his family will never be broke.
Yeah, he made,
Well, you never know. That's what they said about
Where the
multiple
Christmas
world-
tree in New York is, that's the Rockefeller
yeah,
Center.
the Rockefeller Center in New York.
Oh, I love
Yep.
that place at Christmas.
NBC
That's all I know.
Studios.
Yep, John D. Rockefeller. That's him.
I wish I
And
could.
he was, as the video mentioned, he did start out poor. I think his family was, what was his family? I think his dad was actually a con man. He sold snake oil, believe it or not. And his mom,
Like Sickle.
yeah, just worked kind of odd jobs, and then he actually had a keen business sense as a child. He sold candy to his friends, and he started contributing to his family because his dad would be away, kind of selling his snake oil, and his keen business sense led him to develop Standard Oil, and that made him a lot more money. So, what should we put in our
Must suck.
matrix for Rockefeller?
Owned largest refining company in the world.
Yep, that's a good part of it, the largest refinery. Kind of an overarching thing, maybe? How about that he,
First refinery?
Standard
well,
oil.
he wasn't the first refinery. Yeah, Standard
Oh, was
Oil.
it? Oh, first refinery.
was a big one.
Oh, crap, okay. Sorry.
And he was the person that kind of took the oil industry from kind of a thing. I mean, it was pretty large, but he was the one that made it real big business. So he kind of took it from what it was to the next level, kind of the national level, more so than it had been before. So we will.
You know, I'm just noticing, look at his hair.
The Johns?
Yeah, it like goes up like a triangle thing.
That was the style, Libby.
That's hilarious.
Looks like he has some attitude in that picture.
They didn't often smile in
Yeah,
pictures.
just like, give me my camera.
No, well, if we're talking about pictures, interesting fact: the early pictures you had to pose for something like 5 to 10 minutes, so they weren't usually smiling because they had to sit still for.
Especially if
So
they were
long,
family
so-
photos.
So they couldn't really hold a smile for 10 minutes or whatever it took. So
He looks like he was like, you know, cracking a smile, but at that point.
He's like,
He broke it.
Yeah, he broke it.
Funny.
He broke it.
okay, so now we should have our matrices pretty well filled out. So let's look at these matrices and see if we can identify some similarities between some of these guys, maybe some differences. So how about, let's see, let's compare Drake and Keir. How were those guys kind of similar? How did they play off of each other would be a good one. How did they, Matt?
Drake was the first to, he had the first successful oil well, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here was, I think he was the first to successfully process or refine oil, I think, right?
Yep.
Okay. I Is that right?
Yep,
Oh,
that's
okay.
right. So Drake started finding oil in kind of marketable quantities, and Keir took that and refined it and was able to sell it, turned it into, the main thing at the time was kerosene. So they used that for heating, lighting. And so he kind of used Edwin Drake's contribution to help himself gain some popularity and money in the refining process. And let's see, how about an easy one would probably be Van Sickle and the Densmore brothers.
They were big into, both of them were big into transporting oil in one way or another, but more, like, not just individual, but they were more bulk men. I mean, transporting oil in bulk.
Yep. Van Sickle developed the pipeline, which was able to move more oil faster than Teamsters, and the Densmore brothers found a way to haul it in bulk instead of in all the individual barrels. And let's look at, how about the Robertses and Rockefeller? There should be a pretty easy similarity there.
What are we looking at?
E.A.L. Roberts and John D. Rockefeller.
Acronym.
All right, I'll give you a little help. The Robertses, and they patented not only the torpedo, but the process of using it to shoot a well. So they held a monopoly on that process. And Rockefeller
held a monopoly on everything else,
Yep.
pretty much.
Rockefeller eventually had a monopoly on pretty much every other aspect of the oil industry.
Let me find some oil stuff.
So, how do you think that the oil industry would have been different had, I guess, pick one of these guys and tell how it would have been different if they had not done what they did?
Drake, for sure.
Yep, Drake. So how would it have been different if Drake hadn't?
Because he originally started it. Like,
Yep.
I mean, I'm sure someone else probably would figure out eventually, how to, build or, have an oil well, but, it just, I feel like with him, it's like, you kind of have to, everyone else. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You know what I mean? 'Cause I'm sure someone else would have came along and figured it out eventually, but maybe we wouldn't be as far advanced as we are today.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sure someone else would have figured it out. He
Yeah.
was actually hired by a company in New York, and he had really no qualifications other. The reason they hired him mainly was he was a retired railroad conductor, so he had a pass. He could ride the railroad for free. So they sent him to Titusville. He happened to be, he was out of work and in the area, so they heard of him and they sent him to Titusville. So they would have probably sent someone else eventually.